This is one of those interviews you have got to listen to appreciate. Larry Elder had Chris Matthews of MSNBC on as a guest, and completely humiliated him, intellectually and verbally. Chris Matthews had to swallow some of his own medicine, and towards the end of the segment, was almost brought to tears. This interview may very well define Chris Matthews' career, as it will go down in history as a slaughter.
Larry Elder here. He is the host of MSNBC's Hardball and the Chris Matthews Show. He also has a new book out called Jack Kennedy, Elusive Hero. Please welcome to the show, Chris Matthews. Chris, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Larry.
Chris, first, do you still feel that as a journalist it's your job to help Obama succeed?
Well, it's certainly my job to help any new president succeed, and that was my goal when I said that. And I think that was true when I voted for Bush in 2000 and hoped that he would do well until he made some decisions I couldn't live with. And when that comes with Obama, I will break with him. So far, he's done what I think he should. He hasn't been the leader I think he should be, but he's made the decisions I think I would make.
You consider yourself a journalist?
Yeah, I'm a journalist. I'm a columnist. I'm a commentator.
No, a journalist. You think you're an objective, down-the-middle journalist?
No, I'm not down the middle, although I'm slightly to the left.
Slightly to the left?
I'd say 40-yard lines.
For example, as when you said this.
Here's a party that I just keep keeping the list. They want more people to fry. They love executions. They want people that don't have insurance to die on the gurney in the hospital bed. They want that to happen. They want to forget about illegal aliens. Gay soldiers, forget about them. They're there to be booed. If you're homeless, foreclose on. If you have a home, foreclose on the people. If you're a teacher, a fireman, or a cop, get rid of the guy. I mean, this attitude of causing cruel pain on people and getting cheers for it. What's that about, Howard?
You think it's a fair analysis of Republicans, Chris?
I think it's a fair analysis of the performance of the audiences and the candidates in the primary season this year. You mean because
a couple people laughed?
Do you want to answer the question or what? Do you want me to answer it?
Chris, I'm sorry for cutting you off the way you cut your guests off, but I want to get to the point here. Because a couple of people
have. Do you want to make a point, or do you want to ask me questions?
Because a couple of people have laughed. Do you think that reflects on the whole party?
I think that nobody stood up and said that was not the position of our party. Those people should be reprimanded, and they certainly had a hard time doing it, didn't they? Why didn't Mitt Romney, who's a moderate in many ways, why didn't he say, "Don't boo soldiers in uniform fighting for our country"? Why didn't he do that? Just answer that question.
I'm happy to answer the question. They all said that either they didn't hear it, or when they were asked about it, they said it was inappropriate. All of them said that, Chris. Every single one of them did.
That, wouldn't they? They would say that because that's the political.
You asked me whether or not they responded, and I told you they all said it was a wrong thing to have said.
So what do you want to do? Argue? We disagree.
We sure do disagree. Now let's talk about your book. I read the entire book, Chris. And what gets me about your book is that you seem to be painting Kennedy as a elusive hero, as you put it, because of what he did with respect to the Cuban Missile Crisis. That seems to be the singular achievement around which the whole book is written. Am I fair about that?
Well, I would start with his heroism in World War II, and I'd work up to that.
Okay, let's talk about the PT-109. You don't at all discuss how the boat got into trouble in the first place. A lot of historians feel that it was his own irresponsible handling of the PT-109 that caused the boat to get into trouble, that caused him to engage in the heroics that he clearly did.
That would be a conservative or right-wing point of view.
Oh, really?
A person who was prejudiced against Kennedy. If there's no moon, there's no stars, there's no radar. Those are the conditions.
Okay, let me
read. Boat is operating at. Can I answer?
Well, you call me right-wing.
No,
you call me right-wing, so I want to deal with what you just now said. This is from HistoryNet.com.
No, you are quoting historians who are right-wing. Would say something like that.
You think Gary Wills is right wing?
Yes, he is. On this point, he's wrong.
No, you said right wing. Is he right wing?
Is this a game show, or are we trying to find out?
I'm talking about your book where you completely ignore what Gary Willis said. Gary Willis said he had been inattentive as a commander, and he worried himself that after the events were done, he might get court-martialed for his irresponsibility. None of that is in your book. I'll give you another one. This is from HistoryNet.com. The collision was part of a wild night of blunders by 109 and other boats that one historian later described as the most screwed-up PT boat action of World War II, all of which was ignored in your book.
Larry, why don't you write a book about Jack Kennedy and attack him? I think he's a hero.
I am simply talking about the fact that you completely ignore why Kennedy had to result in the heroics that he had to result in. And many historians believe that it was his own irresponsibility that put him in the position in the first place.
That is not my story.
I know it's not.
I don't believe that's true.
So Gary Willis is wrong, and History.net is wrong. And the Boston Globe is also wrong when they wrote a column about the movie that was made about Jack Kennedy.
They can write what they want.
Okay.
I have the facts.
All right, let's talk about the Cuban Missile Crisis. You completely ignore the fact that Kennedy, without preconditions, sat down with Khrushchev. And Dean Rusk, his own Secretary of State, told him not to do it. Khrushchev...
That was in April of 1961. Go ahead.
That's right. Told him not to do it. Khrushchev did. Even Kennedy...
What is the purpose of this conversation?
The purpose of
the
conversation... The purpose right now is to show that you are glossing over Kennedy. You are airbrushing the bad things to make a book where you completely put him on your shoulders without talking about why he got into trouble with the PT-109, why he got into trouble with Cuban Missile Crisis. No, you don't. No, you don't. You don't mention at all that he had this disaster.
What is this conversation about? Do I have any role in this show, or do I just sit here and listen to your rap?
I will repeat what I just now said. It's not. If you want to hang up, go ahead and hang up, Chris.
To listen to you or to talk?
You wrote a book. I'm talking about your book, and you completely.
Is my job here to listen to
you completely. May I say something, Chris?
Is that my job to listen to this rap?
Yes, your job is to listen until I finish my question, and you can respond.
It's a question?
It is a question. In your book, Chris, you completely ignore the fact that JFK's own blunders encouraged Khrushchev to put missiles in October.
That's what you say, Larry. That's your statement.
New York Times. Kennedy talk, Khrushchev triumphed. Nathan Thrall, Jesse James Wilkins. Do you know who they are?
No.
A move that would be regarded as one of the most self-destructive American actions of the Cold War, referring to this summit that he had with Khrushchev, one that contributed to the most dangerous crises of the nuclear age. Senior statesmen like George Kennan advised Kennedy not to rush into a high-level meeting against Khrushchev. Kennedy's own Secretary of State had argued much the same.
What does that have to do with the Cuban Missile Crisis?
You ignore the fact that we wouldn't have had the crisis but for his reckless...
That's what you say.
A lot of historians say that, Chris. You completely ignore that in your book.
I am fully aware of the critique.
You didn't put it in your book whatsoever. You didn't put it in your book whatsoever.
Okay, Larry.
But Kennedy went ahead, quote, and for 2 days he was pummeled. For 2 days he was...
How much, Larry, you just want to yell.
For 2 days he was pummeled by the Soviet leader. Despite his eloquence, Kennedy was no match as a sparring partner.
Who are you quoting?
The same article I mentioned. New York Times, Kennedy talked, Khrushchev triumphed.
Larry, go on. Just finish your whole draft of a commentary, and I'll say I listened to it.
Thank you. The point is that Kennedy's performance was disastrous. He shouldn't have had the summit in the first place. His own Secretary of State advised him against it, none of which is mentioned in your book. Now, I want to know why.
I have given, if anybody wants to go to a bookstore, don't buy the book if you don't want to. Listen to Larry Elder. Read the part about the meeting with Khrushchev in early 1961, and you'll see a full description of it, just to shatter your argument.
Do you say that Dean Rusk advised him?
They will find this out.
I read your book. Did you say that Dean Rusk advised
people to go beyond your rap here to reading the book?
Chris, it's a real simple question. Did you or did you not say in your book that Dean Rusk urged him not to have this summit?
Of course not. I didn't talk about Dean Rusk.
Now, why wouldn't you please? The Secretary of State, he advised him not to do it, Chris. You talk about the fact. You talk about the fact that he.
You think Dean Rusk was a good Secretary of State?
You talk about the fact that.
You think he was a good Secretary of State? Just tell me if he's your witness. Tell me if you think he's a good one. Do you think Dean Rusk was a good Secretary of State?
I think it was unwise for Kennedy to have had this. I'm answering your question. I think he should have listened to him and listened to George Kennan and other people who told him not to have this sit down with Khrushchev. After Khrushchev sat down with him, he thought he was weak and inexperienced. At that point, he built the Berlin Wall. At that point, he put missiles in Cuba. This never would have happened had he not been so reckless. A lot of historians say that, Chris. That's why I'm quoting the New York Times.
Let me just tell you something, Larry. All I ask is people to pick the book up at the bookstore, read a bit of it, and think if what you're saying is true, and decide that.
He told James Reston of the New York Times that this was the roughest thing in my life. Quote, he just beat the hell out of me. I've got a terrible problem if he thinks I'm inexperienced and have no guts. Until we remove those ideas, we won't get anywhere with him. That was Kennedy himself.
All of that in the book. Just read the book.
You don't have Reston saying he just beat the hell out of me?
I have Reston's a whole account of the meeting with Kennedy.
You have Reston saying he just beat the hell out of me?
Words. Look, Larry, why don't you write your diatribe about how much you hate Jack Kennedy and sell it called I, Larry Elder, Hate Jack Kennedy, and see if anybody wants to buy it.
Chris,
I'm sure you'll sell a lot of copies to your viewers.
Chris,
I think go to the bookstore and read the book.
Chris, I think that Jack Kennedy's singular economic achievement was the Bush tax was the Kennedy tax cuts. Let me finish. Let me finish. You spent about a half a page on the tax cuts. Why is that? You still there?
I'm listening to you.
You spent about a half a page on his tax cut. That was a singular domestic achievement.
I'm trying to be polite, and I come on your show because you invited me on the show.
No. You called us and you asked to come on. I didn't invite you. You called us.
Well, then why don't we end this now, okay?
Your people called. I want to know why you didn't. I want to know why you only spent a half a page on the tax cuts.
I don't want to listen to this anymore.
I want to know why you only spent a half a page on the tax cuts. How can you write a book? How can you write a book about Kennedy and spend a half a page on the tax cuts? How can you do that? You still there?
I'm listening to it. This is an embarrassment.
I'd like to know how can you write a book about Kennedy and only spend about a half a page on the tax cuts? I'm sorry?
Larry, this is absurd. Why do you have me on the show?
You talk about Choate and you talk about his upbringing and how sickly he was and lots of things, but you spend about a half a page on the singular domestic achievement of him, which is tax cuts.
This is why this country is being torn apart with this kind of hatred. This is the hatred that people engage in, the hatred of Jack
No, it's called a disagreement. It's called a disagreement, not hatred. Not hatred, Chris. It's called a disagreement.
No, it's
you perceive it as hatred. You perceive it as hatred, just like you perceive that the Republicans want people to die on gurneys and they don't care about illegal aliens and all the other silly things that you've said.
The cheering.
That's hatred. That's hatred, Chris.
To the right wing, an embarrassment. The cheering that went on in that debate when people
cheering,
the number of people exhausted.
Cheering. There were a handful of people out of about 1,500 people that jeered, and you are extrapolating that to the whole party. That's ridiculous.
Play the tape.
I will play the tape. Thank you for coming on, Chris.
It's been a joy, sir.
You got it. It's been a slice. Larry Elder, back in a second.